Hey, Chappie here, and it is time for a review of the bike I bought in New Zealand to do touring, which is a MT09 Tracer, which comes with the side panniers and set up a little bit more for that crossover use of touring. It's probably what you describe as a sport tourer with a little bit of adventure use as well. So done nearly 5,000 kilometres, ridden it from sort of North Island down to the South Island some months ago, and have been touring around on the bike. And as I say, I've done over 5,000 kilometres, so I think I can give some justifiable feedback. Not paid to do any of this stuff, so it's just my own impression of how the bike has performed, what I like, what I dislike. And I've not had a bike like this for some time. I think it was back in probably about 77 or 78 or something, that I owned a Yamaha RD400. I've had Hondas back in those days, Suzuki's, but of recent times I've been travelling mostly on my Harley Davidson, which I took right around Australia, and I've done rides on Harleys in America up to Sturgis. So those bikes I know really well. I know them from the point of view of touring, so this was a whole new beast for me to learn to ride and to see how it performs. So let's go over the things I probably like about it, which is it is a nice performing bike. It's just over 110 brake horsepower, so there is ample smooth performance out of the engine. It's an inline 3-cylinder. I don't do the tech stuff. You can look that up online and knock yourself out with all the numbers and so forth, but in essence, inline 3-cylinder, 850cc. This is a 2016 model, and it comes with ABS, traction control, 3 rider modes. I'll talk about that a little bit now to start off. Maybe is that I did read on some forums before I bought the bike that it comes with 3 rider modes. They're sort of loosely defined as standard, A and B, which doesn't tell you much, but from what I heard, B was didn't do bugger all. Most people seem to ride them around in standard, and A was the equivalent of probably a sport mode. So A really does light the bike up. I mean, they say that in those sport modes you're really getting all the response but out of only half the throttle. So I found it a little bit too aggressive. When I did click it over onto that, I was on a fairly tight, twisty road. I was up in the upper South Island of New Zealand, and I just found it just jumped out of corners way I wasn't used to that. So probably guys that ride these type of bikes all the time wouldn't have a problem, and it certainly enhances the performance, makes the sound a bit more throatier, and if you like riding hard like that with the performance, it would probably do fine. But for me, I just like the standard mode. It works. It's a little bit smoother on the power side of things. There's ample torque on these bikes. They will run out of most gears with plenty of torque, so no issue there. So the rider modes, B, yeah, didn't really notice what B did any differently over A, but for me the standard mode was the one that did me best for that sort of use. Height wise, it's for someone like myself who's not a major league basketball player, so you know, I'm one of those what I like to think as vertically not too challenged, but at 5'7", that ain't that tall. So I'm right on my limit on this bike, in a sense that I can flat foot it if I'm pushed forward on the seat, and I'm on my sort of ball on my foot, you know, the front ball on my foot if I'm on just general terrain. So I find that when I'm loaded up, like I put a bit of weight on it with the top box, which I'll put on shortly, and the side panniers and camping gear. I mean, I'm living off the bike essentially, so I find that that's really pushing me just to the limits a bit. And I suppose in preference I would have preferred a bike that was just slightly not quite as tall. Plus side is I've had it over gravel roads. Whilst it's not an adventure bike, you can take gravel riding and do that quite satisfactory, which for New Zealand is kind of a necessity, because a lot of places you get to, the road will run out of seal and go into gravel, and that's where you get the real gem of the scenery. So yeah, not an adventure bike, but high enough clearance off the ground that you can just meander your way down some gravel roads, and that's not an issue, which you wouldn't do on a big cruiser. Have done it, and they will do it. I mean, anything with round wheels will go down a road, but yeah, this is probably a little bit better set up for that. So what else can I tell you about it? One thing I found, I was in the rain. I've had a few days in the rain, which is typical in New Zealand. It tends to bloody piss down here occasionally, especially when you get over onto the west coast side of the South Island. So I've never been a fan of these sort of modern designs, but I have to say there's a benefit about it. Like, I've been on this bike in heavy rain. The screen is not great. I mean, it's not like I'm used to with a big full fairing on my Harley. but at the same token it kind of does the job. So it pushes that wind up over the top of the helmet. But what I find is these little flares on the tank here, and if you look at it from sort of front on, they do the job really well. So all this venting through here seems to push air away from you. And I mean, I've been in heavy rain. My jeans have only got really a little bit wet in the lower part of them, so I haven't had to even crack out the leggings, which I've got sitting up on the handlebars there. So this kind of, all this flaring here and this air movement tends to push the wind and rain, particularly around you, which, you know, I have to take my hat off. Whilst you may not aesthetically like some of these bikes compared to your old traditional type cruisers, they are functional in their design and they work well, even right through to the split in the headlight here, which again pushes wind around. These little hand protectors have worked well for me. Purists I've read sort of say that the suspension is a bit ordinary on these bikes. I suppose the key to that is you've got to have something to compare it to. And if you've upgraded the suspension, I suppose like on any motorbike, it's one of the best upgrades you can do is upgrade the suspension. So until you do it, you don't really know what the difference is. So I'm not dissatisfied with the suspension on this bike. I have done the setting down in here on that monoshock side of it. I'm probably one short of the softest setting. So it seems to have worked fine for me. I don't have an issue with it. I'm comfortable enough on the bike. But as I say, until you upgrade suspension, you wouldn't know what you're missing, sort of thing. A gripe, something I really don't like about this bike, which I think is a piss poor design, is the side stand. It is shit house. So on 2 occasions now, the bike has tipped over on me when I've parked it. I've been on a little bit of an angle, but that is crap. Basically, it's now got movement in it, which is not good. But if you have a look at it, this little pivot point is way too small, so when the bike's loaded up, and not excessively loaded, just what you would typically have touring, it'll just pivot off that point if you've got too much angle, because it already sits at too much angle, even on a dead flat surface, and it will just pivot, pirouette on that point, and your bike goes over. Very embarrassing, I might add, when you're in the main street of Motueka and you take a tumble off onto the footpath. It's all slow motion, hasn't damaged the bike in any shape or form, but that could have been better designed. I think all they've done is they've taken the MT09 and just put the same stand on it, not realizing that this is a touring based bike, essentially the Tracer, and you're going to have a bit more load on it, and that needed to be better set up. So I've gone down to the local engineer where I am currently, and he's a bike guy, and he was the right guy to go to talk to about this. So he's going to put a bigger plate on the foot of it. The foot is also bent up a little bit. It's just not strong enough, again, for the touring type aspect. So with a wider plate welded on there, angled correctly, and he's going to take all that movement out of the yoke of it. He'll brace that all up, and we should be good to go, because at the moment I just don't feel safe putting it on the side stand. When it happens to you, believe me, it's not a good feeling. You get to that point of no return. There's no coming back, and you just got to bail and let the bike softly land. So that said, I suppose I've picked up a couple of scratches on here on the hand guards, but nothing broke, which is testament. I mean, with the pannier on the side, it protects all the motor, nothing scratched on the motor or anything. But that's the negative. Yamaha, you could do a shitload better than that, and you know, correlate it to the use of the bike. It's the Tracer, it's the touring bike. So maybe in your comments, let me know if anyone else has had the same problem. Load wise, like I'm not too up, I'm just riding single, but I put my heavier load items on the seat, you know, the gear bag, I've got the top box on there. So yeah, it's probably carrying, I don't know, about the weight of an average pillion passenger, around less than 60 kilos of weight. But like I say, if you get on an angle and the bike just pirouettes off that because it's already too far over, and it just bang, that's it, goes over. So that for me is a big gripe for me. Comfort wise, I put the sheepskin on. Hey, I'm a Kiwi, got to have a bit of sheepskin close, and I always find that is actually really good. I have a piece of sheepskin like that on my Harley seat as well. It just makes them just that little bit extra comfortable. It's not the same riding position obviously as a cruiser, it's not supposed to be, so you know, you can get upright on the pegs and stand up and stretch the lower back and things. So I find it comfortable. I've done some long days on it, and perfectly okay. The handlebar setup, again, for me, I'd probably, if I was keeping this bike long term, I'd put a set of risers on there and just get myself up just that little bit more upright. I'm just forward slightly, but again, for sport type riding, that's probably where you want to be. So not that that's a fault at all. You know, it's kind of an industrial look type screen. I like it. It does all the functions you need. You've got heated grips, 3 settings, and they are great. I actually found myself riding cold conditions in the wet thinking, shit, my hands are getting cold, and I suddenly realized, forgot, this bike's got heated hand grips. Put them on, and I gotta say, they are worth it. I know people say, oh, you pussy, why do you want heated grips? But they actually take the tiredness out of your hands. You get mobility into your fingers again, and it's well worthwhile. In fact, on 3, you could taste the sandwich up there. I mean, they're bloody hot. So you can actually go into the menu and adjust those settings to how hot you want those 1, 2, and 3. So I could probably dial that back a little bit, but you know, I found 1's really good just to leave it on those cold, wet sort of days. Power wise, like I said, really nice performing bike. I got caught into a group of riders out on a ride when I was up in the upper South Island, and you know, all cool, perfectly legal of course, but at that bit where we got into that personal track and we could sort of dial it up a bit, this bike you know, really stood out for its own, and that's my story and I'm sticking to it. But you know, they handle really well. It's just smooth, ton of power. You can drive outer corners really, really well. I would be nowhere near using its lean angle. You can see from my cheat strip on the tyre here, I'm at about there. There's still plenty of lean angle left on that bike, and I'm sure younger guys that are much better riders than me would take these to their capacity. But yeah, smooth performance. Gearbox, I've ridden better gearboxes than that. I mean, it does the job. It certainly obviously works, but it's a bit clinical for my liking. It's not what you'd call a smooth gearbox, but that's how they are. So again, it's not a fault of the bike. One thing I did have to do, and it's one of those little things that I read on some forums. So when I first got the bike, I couldn't get it to change when I was under load. When I was accelerating out of second and trying to put it up into third, it would just wouldn't change, and I would have to kind of back off and kind of reset and then make more of a conscious effort to get that gear changed. And what I found from reading forums was that this gear lever, with the Yamahas, they have to be allowed to return to their neutral position. So Harley's a bit different. It'll sort of sit in that spot and you bang it up and you can keep your toe fairly much underneath the gear lever. But on these Yamis, they've got to be allowed to go back to their position. So what I was doing, of course, when you're hammering it out in a gear, all perfectly legal, of course, in the speed limits, my toe was staying underneath the gear lever, and so I wasn't allowing it to get to its reset neutral position to then put it up into third. And part of that problem was that I took it off the spline up here. You see there's a spline there. I took it off and it was set too far down. Probably suited the previous owner, but for me, you know, I've got a small foot, so I needed to get it more into that neutral position so my toe could sit, my boot would sit here and sit down so I could clear it each time. So once I got that sorted, no problem. I mean, never had that issue again. And that's a little tip there for people if you are finding you're having some issues and it seems to be getting, like, it almost feels like it's stuck in gear. It's just that you haven't allowed that to return to the neutral position. So that's one of my little things I just had to learn about and get set on it. Nothing really much else was an issue for me other than learning this type of bike. It's a different type of bike to ride. So getting used to it, really enjoying it. The top box on it just fits on really well. I bought a Ventura Top Box. I'll put that on for you now. Let's just get this sitting down here for a minute. So you have it, nice top box on there. It's a new one that Ventura brought out. I think it's a 40 litre, and it fits on their traditional Ventura bracketing, and there's a special plate that I've just set it on there, you can see. But that works well. I mean, I can get my Bell qualifier helmet in there, locked away, with the 2 side panniers on. Everything just works up a treat. I like to put one of these little combination locks on, so if I'm putting load up into that top box, I can just clip the helmet on there. If I pull up at a gas station, just clip it on, and it just gives you that little bit of extra security, so you've locked it in there. And that's it. So for me, the MT09, I mean, I really like it. It was a bike that I wanted to invest no more than around about, you know, somewhere between, you know, 10 and 12 grand on the bike, because for me it was going to be something I'd use for 6 months, and then when I return back to Australia, I'll sell the bike here locally. And this fitted the bill nicely. So for value for money, I think that's a really good triple combination. You've got sport performance, you've got touring capability, and not full-on adventure, but you can tackle some of those gravel roads. Height-wise, yeah, you probably want to, it's probably going to suit someone a little bit taller maybe, but of course you could pay to have the suspension lowered, drop the forks. Probably, I think they say you can do about 15 to 20 mil drop on the clamps, and you could reconfigure that to get it down a little bit lower, but I was just leaving it stock standard as I bought it. It was a one owner bike, really nice condition. It's only got 18,500 k. It'll probably be up less than 25 by the time I sell it. So if anyone's after a really good MT09 tracer, I'll probably sell it with my camping gear and everything, because I won't be taking any of that back. So it's got a really good tent set up with it, everything like that. You can just comment to me down below, and we can chat about that. I'll probably be heading back around about end of March. So there you have it. It came with a radar detector, so that's probably not a good thing if you get pulled over to have one of those on there, but it was all mounted up and sits on there. If you're wondering what that is, that's just my setup of where I put my leggings, which, as I say, I haven't had to use. And that's always handy. I don't know if you guys see that. You just put a little Velcro belt around there. That's holding my leggings on. 2 slits in it so you can slip it through. And what that's good for is when you get out at the gas station and you just want to pop your shades in there, you can just pop them in there nice and safe, or if you need something sat in there while you're riding. So there you have it, MT09 tracer. I suppose my preference bike, because I used to sell Triumphs, is if I was going to buy, and I probably will when I get back, I will buy a Tiger GT Pro. It's a little bit lower, comes with a lot more electronic adjustable suspension features. And I've ridden those. I like the nice smooth gearbox on them. It's a 900cc, so it pushes out about 96, I think, brake horsepower. So this is a bit more sport performance than what would be a Triumph GT Pro, but the Triumph GT Pro is a really nice handling bike. Yes, they're more expensive. I couldn't find one of those secondhand to suit my value, so that's why I went with the MT09 Tracer. So for me, that's a bike, and I'd give it a good competent, I don't know, 7 out of 10 as a bike that I'm enjoying and liking. And there you have it. It's a no BS review of an MT09 Tracer. Till next time, keep your eyes on the horizon, your knees in the breeze, and let's get it out on the road.